Breaking tonight, Canada just revealed something Washington completely missed. The harder America pushes, the stronger Canadian resolve becomes. Tensions are rising across North America tonight. Donald Trump threatened tariffs, demanded territorial concessions, and expected Canadian capitulation. But instead of weakness, Ottawa displayed unity. Instead of division, the Canadian people showed determination. Everyone believed external pressure would fracture Canadian support for sovereignty. Political analysts expected Trump's threats to create internal conflict. Washington assumed economic coercion would force policy reversals. Financial markets predicted Canadian voters would demand their government back down. They were all utterly incorrect. Ottawa, January 21st, 2026. The Spark Insights polling firm released data from 4,000 Canadian respondents that shocked political observers across the continent. 64% approval for the Carney government, 78% support for the China trade agreement. 66% of Canadians believe the Conservative Party should replace Pierre Poilievre. Translation: the Canadian people aren't reacting to pressure. They're making a conscious choice about their nation's future. And what happened next? A country that refused to be intimidated reveals exactly why democratic determination defeats authoritarian coercion, and why Canadian sovereignty is being built on public conviction, not political manipulation. Dear viewers, between November 2025 and January 2026, something extraordinary happened in Canadian political consciousness. Trump pushed harder. Carney pushed back. And the Canadian people, watching carefully, analyzing deeply, made a deliberate decision about which path their country should follow. This isn't a story about popularity. This is a story about purpose. Let me walk you through what these polling numbers actually represent, because the mainstream narrative completely misses the point. 64% approval for the Carney government. That number sits above 66% in every region except Alberta, where it stands at 57%. Above 60% with every age group. Even 28% of people who voted Conservative last year now approve of Carney's government. But here's what matters more than the number itself. This approval rating reversed a November dip. It rose as external pressure intensified. It increased as Trump's threats became more aggressive. It climbed as Washington's demands became more outrageous. The pattern is unmistakable. The more America pushes, the more Canadians unite behind their sovereignty. 63% of Canadians would prefer a Carney victory if an election happened now. That includes 55% of Alberta voters, the province most skeptical of Ottawa, 80% of previous NDP voters, 70% of previous Bloc Québécois voters. Think about what that means. Voters who supported completely different parties last year are now united behind a single priority: Canadian independence from American dominance. This isn't partisan politics. This is national consciousness. Now let's examine the moment that proves Canadian voters understand exactly what's happening. Mark Carney met with Chinese President Xi Jinping and negotiated an agreement reducing tariffs on canola and electric vehicles. Increased canola sales to China. Some Chinese EVs entering the Canadian market. A straightforward trade diversification move. Washington reacted predictably. Accusations of betrayal. Warnings about Chinese influence. Demands for policy reversal. And how did Canadians respond? 78% said the agreement was the right thing to do for Canada. 78%, including 77% in the prairie provinces, where canola farming is an economic lifeline. 75% in Ontario, Canada's manufacturing heartland. Even 56% of Conservative voters supported the deal. Translation: Canadian voters looked at their options, evaluated their interests, and consciously chose economic sovereignty over American approval. They understood the calculation perfectly. Dependence on American markets means vulnerability to American coercion. Diversification to Asian markets means leverage in continental negotiations. Trading with China doesn't mean trusting China. It means refusing to let Washington dictate Canadian economic policy. The Canadian people made that choice with their eyes wide open. No illusions, no naivety, just clear-eyed determination to control their own economic destiny. Now watch what happens when a political party misjudges this national mood. Pierre Poilievre built his entire political brand on being the change agent against Justin Trudeau's decade-old government, attacked the establishment, promised disruption, positioned himself as the outsider ready to shake things up. Then Mark Carney actually became the change agent, actually disrupted the status quo, actually challenged the establishment, both in Ottawa and Washington. And Poilievre? Suddenly, he's the one defending the old order, criticizing trade diversification, questioning sovereignty moves, suggesting Canada should accommodate American demands. The Canadian people noticed 61% have a positive view of Carney personally. Only 39% feel the same way about Poilievre. That's the exact same yawning gap that Poilievre enjoyed over Trudeau a year ago, except now it's working against him. Even more devastating, 66% of Canadians think the Conservative Party should replace Poilievre. That includes 27% of people who voted Conservative last year. Think about that. More than 1 in 4 Conservative voters are telling their own party, this leader doesn't fit the moment we're living through. Why? Because Poilievre has been an Ottawa politician for over 20 years with no resume of accomplishments outside politics. Because his positions on China seem vague and incoherent. Because his stance on America appears detached from mainstream Canadian views. Because in a moment demanding sovereign leadership, he's offering business as usual with an anti-establishment aesthetic. The Canadian people see through it. They're not asking for performance. They're asking for protection of national interests. And they've decided Carney delivers while Poilievre performs. Now here's the context that makes this polling data even more significant. Canadians are terrified right now. 79% say they feel overwhelmed by the world as it is today. 83% of women, 85% of people under 30, 78% fear things will never again feel settled in the world. 65% expect there will be a world war in the next 10 years. And here's the number that explains everything. 80% of Canadians feel America can no longer be trusted. That includes 86% of Conservative voters. Let that sink in. Conservative voters, the demographic most traditionally aligned with pro-American sentiment, have abandoned faith in American reliability at the exact same rate as the general population. Translation: the entire Canadian political spectrum has reached the same conclusion about their southern neighbor, and that shared recognition is reshaping national politics. This is why Carney's approval isn't built on happiness. It's built on determination. Canadians aren't celebrating, they're mobilizing. They're not optimistic, they're resolute. They look at the world and see chaos. They look at America and see unreliability. They look at their options and see one path that makes sense: economic diversification, sovereign decision-making, and leadership that puts Canadian interests first. They're giving Carney room to run because they believe his economic agenda is the only one that protects their future. They're not in the mood for an election they don't need because they've already decided which direction they want their country moving. This is what conscious choice looks like in a democracy facing external pressure. Look at where Carney's government scores Wachisueti strongest in public perception, finding new trading partners and customers for Canada, improving Canada's image in the world, diversifying trade relations, drawing new investment to the country. These aren't traditional political priorities. These are sovereignty priorities, economic independence priorities, national security through economic resilience priorities. And Canadians approve because they understand those priorities matter more than partisan politics right now. Between December and January, 5-point improvements on focusing on the right priorities, working to improve the economy, diversifying Canada's trade, and handling relations with the US. Every single metric moving in the same direction. Every single improvement connected to sovereignty and economic independence. Every single gain coming as external pressure intensifies. The Canadian people are watching their government stand firm against American demands, negotiate with Asian powers, invest in domestic infrastructure, and build economic alternatives to continental dependence. And they're saying, yes, this is what we want. Keep going. So where does this leave us? Mark Carney has something no Canadian Prime Minister has enjoyed in years: genuine public mandate for transformational change. Not because people love him, but because people understand the necessity of what he's doing. The opposition has something they haven't faced in years: a fundamental mismatch between their political positioning and public mood. Conservative criticism of Carney's China engagement lands flat when 78% of Canadians support the approach. Attacks on trade diversification fail when majorities approve of finding new markets. And Canada has something it hasn't possessed in decades: a population consciously united behind economic sovereignty, regardless of partisan affiliation, regional difference, or demographic variation. This is the foundation for genuine national transformation. not imposed from above by political elites, but built from below by public conviction. Dear viewers, we're watching something rare in democratic politics, a moment when external pressure clarifies rather than confuses, when threats unite rather than divide, when a population looks at their options and makes a conscious, collective choice about their nation's future. The harder Washington pushes, the clearer that choice becomes. And as Parliament resumes in Ottawa this January, Mark Carney walks into that chamber knowing something Donald Trump completely failed to understand. You can threaten a government, but you cannot intimidate a people who have already decided what they're willing to fight for. That's the Canada we're seeing emerge in these numbers. Not naive, not reckless, just determined. And determination, backed by democratic mandate, is the most powerful force in geopolitics. If you found this analysis valuable, if these patterns matter to you, consider what happens when we build a community focused on understanding Canada's transformation rather than just reacting to headlines. The comment section is where that community gathers. Because this story isn't finished, it's just beginning, and Canadians have decided they're writing it themselves. That's what sovereignty looks like when a people choose it consciously, and no amount of external pressure changes that choice. The polling data referenced in this analysis comes from Bruce Anderson's January 2026 Spark Insights survey, published on his Substack.